This week on Arizona Illustrated, a glimpse at the Tucson Museum of Art 2015 Arizona Biennial, remembering Mukhi Singh, and the power of words. Hello, and welcome to Arizona Illustrated. I'm Tom McNamara. The Arizona Biennial at the Tucson Museum of Art offers visitors an opportunity to see a variety of new work being created by artists who reside in the state. Now, 50 pieces were chosen from the nearly 1,500 that were submitted. Here's a glimpse at the oldest running juried art exhibition featuring exclusively Arizona artists.
The Tucson Museum of Art has been holding a biennial, or at least a regular competition of this sort, since 1948. So it's been going on for quite a long time. But over time, we've switched, around 1999, to a single juror, a single curator, and we try to mix it up from different parts of the country, different institutions, different genders. This year, we selected Irene Hoffman, and she's the director and chief curator at Site Santa Fe. So she's known for her far-reaching ideas, conceptual art.
I have heard of the curator before, and so I was hoping to be a part of it. And I just was shocked when I came in just to see how the pieces are very distinct and individual, and yet they work together. They sort of tell a slow story.
It is such a beautiful show. And my placement is awesome too.
Well, I think this is one of the most interesting exhibitions we've had. What we found later, after she made selections of what she thought was the best work, the strongest work, was a focus on nature and humankind's intervention in nature. Another section that sort of emerged was the idea of reclamation, the idea of looking at detritus or found objects in the desert, or repurposing materials that would otherwise be tossed aside, to look at sort of reinventing the idea of beauty in the discarded. We also found that there was a section that kind of emerged about violence in our gun culture. And then last but not least, the pure love of paint, the seduction of painting and color and design, in a way to reaffirm that painting is not dead, beauty is not dead. There are beautiful things in all these different themes running throughout the exhibition.
I don't ever think painting has been dead. I think painting is continually reinvented. I think a person making photographs deals with the same things that a painter does, same thing with sculpture, installation, video. The world is now just more open to maybe different perspectives of how we can best express ourselves. So no, painting will never be dead. That's just what other artists and disciplines say. And art can be just beautiful, but it can also be something that makes people question things or just contemplate things they think are unimportant until they maybe see them in a painting or in a video, or they watch an artist do a performance. Art is a way to move people, essentially.
During my MFA program, I started with narrative works, and then I started to want to do work that I hadn't seen before. And so I started working with rust. I had a studio right across from the railroad tracks. I would go on little scavenger hunts and find interesting rusted pieces. And I started placing them on paper and then working, drawing, painting with those rusted objects. Eventually it led to this, what would happen if I took, instead of 2 or 3 rusted pieces, if I took thousands of rusted pieces. And so I started creating these large pieces on paper.
There's the beauty in it all is to be able to think and appreciate on a visceral level, on a visual level, on an intellectual level. And these things are not hitting you over the head with those ideas. They are subtle, they're poetic.
I don't want to do political art. I believe that the form itself should be interesting or engaging and kind of represent ways of thinking. I think this piece kind of functions as a manifesto for me, where I want to present the artist as laborer versus creator. So I've been trading my labor for sawdust.
What is the value of something, you know? And here she's creating a work of art based on making something, but not making the object that she's showing. She made something else and traded for a token of what that labor represents. And she's reducing it to these beautiful grids of simple sawdust encased in frames. It's not an area that one comes to lightly. You make a commitment to be here. You love the land, you care about what's happening. So artists in this area are not only drawn to the idea of place, but they're also, like everyone else, they're attuned to what's happening in the world.
In Tucson, we're also kind of sensitized to reusing things, maybe because we realize that there are certain issues of scarcity.
So I was out in the field last summer with a group of scientists that have an NSF grant to study forest mortality. And I was there with my, charcoals and everything, and like doing the sort of art, with the scientist thing. And then we got back to the research station, and he showed me these exquisite hemispheric photographs that they had taken thousands of just as a metric for die-off. I really wanted to animate them, so it felt like you were seeing the forest in front of your eyes go from lush to dead.
It needed to be projected up, and the public needed to be able to lie down. And that then opened up all the questions about, well, how can we make an environment that might even feel like lying down on the floor of the forest? So of course it meant that this was going to have to be some kind of multi-sensory, immersive experience, so that you're not just looking at these images, but you're also hearing the forest around you. You're hearing it because you're lying on pillows that go crunch, crunch, crunch when you lie back on them, and there's all of the perfume of the pine needles that fill the pillows that just add to that experience.
We don't change because of what we know, we change because of what we feel about what we know. And I think this is where art has a little leverage. It's like, okay, how can art make you feel in such a way that you change? Whereas knowing it is not going to do it. But somehow having an emotional experience with something created by an artist or a designer, can that make a difference?
You don't have to shut out the rest of the world in order to enjoy art. You can enjoy it on multiple levels, and I think that's what this exhibition and this museum does. Our mission is to connect art to life, and I think that's what museums can do, is find that interface in ways that sports or television can't do.
Arizona Biennial 2015 will be on exhibit at the Tucson Museum of Art through October 11th. Food trucks. You see them in cities from Portland to Austin and Tucson as well, serving all kinds of food and smiles to their patrons. Mukhi Singh was the chef and owner of the popular Twisted Tandoor Indian food truck. He was celebrated and loved by his customers and the foodie community. We were working on a story about the Twisted Tandoor and food truck culture when we learned that Mukhi Singh passed away on August 21st. Producer Mitchell Riley shares the story about the man who many describe as loving, generous, and passionate about food and life.
So every Friday we set up outside Dragoon Brewing Company. We get along like a house on fire. It's fun. You're working under, it's hot, there's smoke and there's heat.
We'd forget how hot it was when we were meeting people, talking to them, selling our food. It was just fun when we had that interaction.
What we call a tandoori chicken.
It was almost like everyone's family,
Chicken tiki masala is the best I had.
It's awesome.
You can taste the grilled flavor, but you also taste the spice that goes into it. It's really good.
It's easy to be around them. I think as an only child, maybe I was always with them, so I didn't want any other job. I kind of looked forward to seeing them and being on the truck.
Being that we're tap room without a kitchen, just seemed like the perfect mix. He really kind of was one of the people that helped us blossom into where we are today.
In my opinion, there's no better bond than curry, spicy food, and a cold beer.
I'm a big fan of the meatballs. It's kind of an old favorite of mine.
It's not just sitting and eating something, it's the whole experience, you know. It's being with friends and family, having a great evening out, enjoying the whole experience. You know, we can talk to our customers and tell them we care about you, you know, I mean, in the little time that we have. My name is Mukhi Singh. I'm 51 years old, and I'm a food truck owner. Probably the only Indian food truck in Arizona, from what I understand. It's called the Twisted Tandoor. And the logo that you see on the truck is actually the colors of the Indian flag, but they're with a twist. This is my daughter, Shireen. This is my lovely wife, Roop. And this is Taylor.
Tyler.
Tyler,
Oh
sorry.
my God.
Tyler.
You have to
sorry.
redo it. You have to redo the
yeah,
whole thing.
okay. And Tyler, our main man on the truck.
He was, I mean, obviously a really smart guy, but he just couldn't spell. And I think English is like his fourth language.
I don't know how to react.
And my mom and I would always make fun of him and be like, we'll do it, you know?
In the morning hours on August 21st, Mukhi Singh died suddenly of an apparent heart attack. He came from a line of farmers and soldiers in the mountainous Punjab region of India and went to school in New Delhi. He first met Roop during a chance encounter on his parents' farm in 1987.
And then he, I think, liked me because I liked wildlife, and he had found fewer women who were so interested in animals and in, you know, common interest, yes, where he knew that, okay, this is somebody who will go out if I want to fish in the wild and not be afraid because there's a little snake somewhere.
That liaison led to love and a 26-year marriage. Their daughter Shireen, a neuro and cognitive science student at the U of A, says she was her father's child.
He always called me Chotu, which means like little one in Hindi. I was always like hunting, fishing with him, that kind of thing. That was, he, you know, I was like his boy, child.
When the Singh family came to America 15 years ago, they carried with them cherished family recipes.
Yeah, it's really, really hot. And it feels even warmer
I
now.
think he really wanted to do something with food because he loved to entertain people and feed them.
So it's like an aromatic, it's, you know,
My dad was always like an idea man. You know, he had always these big ideas, and they were always fruitful.
lime juice.
And they've always made really good food, so they had faith in their food.
And that faith was rewarded. After 2.5 years on the Tucson food truck scene, the Twisted Tandoor became a top money earner and foodie favorite, coming in a close second to Pinup Pastry in a citywide food truck competition sponsored by the Arizona Daily Star. 32 trucks went head-to-head over the summer. Tracy Santa Cruz of Pinup Pastry, a truck dedicated to the sweet tooth, called it a draw.
It was a real battle, and like I told Mukhi in the end, there wasn't a winner. It was both of us. You had sweet and you had savory, and as far as I'm concerned, that's where the contest should have ended.
Both the Tracys who own Pinup Pastries, they work really hard. They have a fabulous product. And you know, we talked about after the results came out, and I said, I always knew Tucson was a kind town. Now we know that it's a sweet town. I got to work on it being a spicy town now. We're doing an event at the TMC on Grant and Craycroft.
It's for the Children's Miracle Network.
Children's Medical Network. Thank you. Thank you.
Fellow food truck owner Jason Scott of Barbecue Rush was a fan and a friend.
If people love him, I mean, wherever he goes and sets up, he sells out.
We're having a chicken tikka masala from Twisted Tandoor.
Dr. Gulshan Sadie was a Twisted Tandoor regular.
I just called my wife. I said, I'm going to bring lunch for you. You know, I grew up in India, so this is an Indian dish. Just one of the best Indian food you can eat.
Many Twisted Tandoor customers shared the same sentiment. With word of mouth and nearly 4,000 followers on Facebook, their hard work was paying off.
You want me to shut the cooker?
We're very fortunate. We're so blessed that we got this opportunity. We were scared like hell when we started, but I think Tucson's more than just kind, you know.
Making food that people would embrace and celebrate took a great deal of work, and sustaining that effort for 2.5 years required commitment.
We didn't realize how much work it would be. You know, it seemed like we'll do a food truck, you know.
Over time, they'd outgrown the truck and were ready to take the next step. They signed a lease to open their own brick-and-mortar version of the Twisted Tan Door. On that August morning, Roop and Mukhi Singh were loading supplies into their new restaurant, a couple of hours before their doors would open to the public. Mukhi collapsed. Emergency responders were unable to revive him.
Yeah, maybe it was all the excitement and hard work, and something gave way.
8 days later, Roop and Shireen invited friends, family, and the food truck community to gather and celebrate his life here at what would have been their new restaurant. Hundreds of people showed up to remember him.
You can tell from today, outpouring of love is a testament to the type of man that he was. I think anyone that had, the opportunity and the pleasure of being around for him even for 10 seconds knows everything that I could ever say.
Today we are here just to celebrate his life and live by his example. God has given us life, let's live it to the fullest. And he did.
You expect to go to a food truck event and the Tan Door to be there and Mukhi to be there. I don't think it's sunk in to anyone. I mean, not just the food truck community. Tucson has lost just a wonderful man.
Gone too soon at age 52, Mukhi Singh will be missed most by those closest to him.
Him, his presence, everything about him, you know. I guess when you've been together so long, and especially here when there's no other family but just us, just the core. Maybe he came to this earth just for this, just to do this much and get over his trials on this earth and then go, leave and then maybe come back again for something new. And hopefully it'll be a better life for him where he is right now.
It's strange, I feel like it's selfish of us to want him around, It's easier. We're still stuck on this material earth, but it's fine. I mean, the impact he's made and stuff is huge, so I don't really have to do much, yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
And as for the future of the Twisted Tan Door, Roop Singh intends to carry on.
I feel I owe it to him and to the community in some form, We have such a supportive community in Tucson now. And I think I can't let that end since it's just beginning.
Most all of us have known someone who has suffered through the death of a loved one. A common concern at these times is what to say and what not to say to the survivors. Jeanette Marais is especially qualified to help figure that out. Marais has always been interested in linguistics, the scientific study of human languages. Her specialty is how words affect the integrity of a message between different cultures, especially when the speakers are trying to be polite. Her academic training makes her especially qualified to discuss the power of words.
Language is actually fascinating. Most of the work I did was at the discourse level, right? So looking at language in use. So how do we understand each other? especially in our English language, we are often not direct in what we say, yet we still make sense of each other, right? There are all of these skills we have to have in order to understand each other. So there's all kinds of ways we say what we mean, and we don't say literally what we mean, and we all have to figure out what people mean and try to interpret what people mean, and that's quite a feat.
13 years ago, Jeanette came to realize that words can be more powerful than she ever imagined.
Well, Ben is my son, and I have two sons. Matt was born first, and he was born on May 29th. And then 3 years later, Ben was born on May 29th as well. And, you know, we had this sort of happy, simple life and had these beautiful kids. And 3 years, nearly 3 years after he was born, you know, we lost him very suddenly and unexpectedly. It was a normal day. We were home. I was home with Matt and Ben, and a friend was over. One of the kids' friends was over as well. And Ben had a cold, and I wasn't worried about him. What I didn't know is that he had croup virus and that his airway was closing. And it did. It closed suddenly. And the next thing I knew, I was giving him CPR, and the ambulance was on its way. And they arrived, and they resuscitated him, but he had been out too long, and so he died the next day in the hospital. Well, it was remarkable how people swarmed around us. It was completely life-saving. I learned quickly that when people talked a lot and people sort of feel the need to say something, it often hurt. And it wasn't until later that I could sort of analyze why, and I can certainly speak to that now. But at the time, I just knew that some stuff that people said just hurt. And I knew that their intentions were positive and they were trying to help, but I also knew that the words really, really stung.
Now Jeanette calls on her linguistic training and personal experiences to help others in similar situations use their words for kindness, teaching what to say and what not to say.
And again, I want to emphasize that I realize that this all comes from good intention. And I realize that I probably have also said these things in my lifetime, right? And I recognize that the only way that we can sort of get better at this is if we talk about it. So at least statements, for example, at least you have another son. At least Ben died quickly. At least he didn't suffer. At least you're young enough to have another child. Any sentence that started with the words, you should, also hurt. You know, you should write about this. You should do this. You should do that. The statement, and this was very, very common, be strong. Be strong. That one almost enraged me. And I had to really calm myself around that one. Be strong. Because I guess the subtext for me in that statement is, you know, stop crying, please stop crying because you're making people feel uncomfortable, right? Or what does be strong mean, right? I thought that the fact that I was up and breathing and walking around must be evidence enough that I was strong, because man, I did not want to be up and breathing and, you know, up and about. I wanted to be curled up. Any comment around what I could have or should have done during his death was absolutely impossible to hear. Somebody told me I should learn how to do a tracheotomy. Somebody actually said that to me. You know, people would say religious things. Again, that didn't hurt as badly, but I'm not a religious person. So that was sort of interesting, the things around God needing a little angel and, you know, Ben being with God and Ben being in heaven and that sort of thing. And there aren't a lot of great words, right? At least initially. So the things that felt good were, I'm sorry, but said in a way, said in a tone that was really vulnerable and real, right? So it was more around people's tone and their feel than around actually what they were saying necessarily. I very much appreciated it when people said, I don't know what to say, but I want you to know I'm here. Or I don't know what to say, but I love you. That was powerful. So I very much appreciated people had the courage to come up to me and say something to me, even if sometimes it wouldn't be the perfect thing to say, right? The perfect thing to say was, I love you. I'm here. I'm thinking about you. I'm going to keep checking in with you.
Sometimes the most common phrases don't project the message or meaning the speaker intends.
So, call me if you need anything is a wonderful sentiment, but the grieving person cannot orchestrate their grief support. Your brain is so muddled and so maxed out with everything that there's no way you're going to call somebody and ask them for help. So I suggest that people try to think of something specific to offer, and then the person will say yes or no. So how are you? Linguistically, again, it's a greeting. We don't expect sort of the real, oh, well, actually, right? It's oh, yeah, I'm good. How are you? I'm good, right? So there's how are you, the greeting, which is actually, could be dangerous in this situation, in a grieving situation, right? And then there's how are you, really wanting to know how the person's doing. So sometimes just adding the word today at the end of that, how are you doing today, acknowledges that the grief process is sort of up and down and all over the place. Grieving people are supposed to feel sad. Sadness is not, it's the right thing for them to be feeling, right? So the supporter of the grieving person's job is not to cheer up the grieving person. And so allowing them to feel sad, but allowing them to feel safe and supported while they feel sad is the job of the supporter. For us to have people around us who love and care for us, who can just be in it and not have to judge it or change it or fix it, is incredibly powerful.
To cope with their grief, Jeanette and her family began working with clay in their backyard. On the first anniversary of Ben's death, family and friends hung hundreds of handmade ceramic Ben's bells with messages of kindness throughout Tucson.
Ben's Bells comes out of exactly what we're talking about. Ben's Bells was born because my family and I recognized how vital this sort of circle of community and kindness was around us. The kindness didn't take away the sadness. The kindness sort of protected us while we felt the sadness, and that made us feel safe. Supporting somebody who's grieving is a skill. We can't just assume that people are going to understand what kindness looks like in these situations, by osmosis. People actually need to have these conversations. We sort of felt the need to communicate this, man, kindness is so much more important than it seems. It's so much more powerful. It's so much tougher and stronger than our culture sort of gives it credit. We're experiencing so much of it. We want to show gratitude for it. And so we came up with Ben's Bells as a way to celebrate kindness, to show gratitude for it, to celebrate Ben and his life.
Ben's Bells is now a non-profit organization dedicated to promoting the power of intentional kindness. It brings together community members to create and give away bells as reminders to be kind. Since its inception, Ben's Bells has hung more than 47,000 bells throughout the United States, all with messages about the power of kindness and its ability to heal.
Thank you for joining us here on Arizona Illustrated. Next week, we celebrate organizations and individuals keeping kids on the path to graduation. A man whose message of universal acceptance is making a difference. The transformative and inspiring power of mariachi, and the steps it took to graduate Forrester. I'm Tom McNamara. See you next week.